For names. For stories. Each one real, each one terrifying. What you're about to see isn't fiction. It's what happens when truth slips into darkness and the ordinary becomes unthinkable. Some stories are too disturbing to be fiction. These were real. These were documented. File 1. The Stanford Prison Files. Imagine you're just a college student, till you're stripped of your identity, locked in a basement, and told to play prison. In 1971, the Stanford Prison Experiment began as a psychological simulation. In just 6 days, it spiraled out of control, revealing how fast power can turn ordinary men into monsters. In August 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo and his team at Stanford University launched a bold experiment. Recruit 24 psychologically stable male college students, pay them $15 a day, about $116 in today's money, and randomly assign them as guards or prisoners in a mock prison built in a university basement. Zimbardo himself stepped into the role of prison superintendent, a decision that blurred the line between science and obsession. Sunday, August 15th, day 1, and the experiment began with a jolt of reality. Without warning, real Palo Alto police stormed into the homes of unsuspecting participants, arresting them on fabricated charges of robbery. Sirens wailed. Neighbors watched. The prisoners were fingerprinted, photographed, read their Miranda rights, and booked like actual criminals. What they didn't know was that this shock was part of the design. Despite murky consent protocols, the arrests were staged to feel authentic. The participants were then transported to the makeshift Stanford County Jail, hidden in the basement of Jordan Hall. There they were stripped, searched, and issued smocks, stocking caps, and ankle chains. Their names were erased. They were now only numbers. The prisoners were then greeted by the warden, who conveyed the seriousness of their offense and their new status as prisoners. With the rules of the prison presented to them, the inmates retired to their cells for the rest of the first day of the experiment. Monday, August 16th, day 2. By the second day, rebellion erupted. At 2:30 a.m., prisoners tore off their ID numbers, ripped off their caps, and barricaded themselves inside cells. Guards retaliated with fire extinguishers, stripping prisoners naked, confiscating beds, and tossing ringleaders into solitary confinement. Psychological warfare began: humiliation, push-ups, and bathroom restrictions. The line between play acting and real cruelty was already gone. Tuesday, August 17th, day 3. Division set in. Guards rewarded compliant inmates with privileges: better food, beds, and clothes. Rebels were punished, forced back into stripped cells. The guards weren't just enforcing order, they were breaking solidarity, turning prisoners against each other. Trust evaporated inside the basement prison. After just 36 hours, prisoner 8612, Douglas Corpy, had a breakdown. Screaming, "I can't stand another night." He begged to leave. He was released, but the damage had been done. Guards now knew how fragile the prisoners really were. Wednesday, August 18th, day 4. Paranoia consumed the prisoners. Divisions deepened based on good or rebellious behavior, with some believing others were snitches. Then prisoner 819 cracked, crying in his cell. A priest was brought in to speak with him, but the young man refused to talk with him and instead asked for a medical doctor. After Zimbardo heard him crying, he told prisoner 819 he could go home. But while he spoke to Zimbardo, the guards cajoled the remaining inmates too, loudly and repeatedly decry that 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 broke down as he heard them calling him bad. Zimbardo released 819 and gave him his pay. Thursday, August 19th, day 5. By day 5, families arrived for visitation. Guards staged a show. Prisoners were cleaned, the cells tidied, but behind the scenes, abuse worsened. Some parents threatened to call lawyers. After seeing their son's condition, that night, psychologist Christina Maslek visited and was horrified by what she witnessed. Prisoners forced to wear paper bags over their heads, degraded and dehumanized. She confronted Zimbardo, asking how he could let this continue. It was the first real challenge to his authority. Friday, August 20th, day 6. Zimbardo faced pressure from parents, colleagues, and Maslek. That morning, after less than a week, he called the guards and prisoners together. The experiment was over. Instead of 14 days, It had lasted only 6. He arranged to pay them for the 6 days the experiment lasted. Zimbardo then met for several hours of informed debriefing, first with all of the prisoners, then the guards, and finally everyone came together to share their experiences. The aftermath was explosive. Some guards were stunned by how far they'd gone. Some prisoners carried psychological scars long after the basement doors closed. Critics condemned the study as unethical, accusing Zimbardo of losing objectivity, more invested in the spectacle than the science. The fallout was swift. The experiment became infamous, a textbook example of research gone wrong. Universities overhauled their ethical standards, strengthening institutional review boards to protect human subjects. Zimbardo himself admitted he'd blurred the line, stepping into the role of prison superintendent and abandoning scientific detachment. Yet questions linger. Scholars like Ali Banu-Aziz, Peter Gray, and Thibault Letexier argue the experiment was manipulated. Guards were coached, participants knew what was expected, and the data was incomplete or biased. Letexier even titled his critique "Debunking the Stanford Prison Experiment." Later evidence supported these claims. Some participants confessed they were playing roles rather than losing control. Replications, including a BBC study, failed to reproduce the cruelty, showing instead solidarity and resistance. The so-called tyranny of roles wasn't inevitable. Critics suggest it was leadership, not the situation alone, that shaped behavior. Still, the experiment remains deeply embedded in popular consciousness. It's invoked in real-world scandals like Abu Ghraib, featured in films and docu-series like Unlocking the Truth, and taught in psychology courses, though textbooks often lag behind the evolving debate. Zimbardo continues to defend the study not as flawless science, but as a dire warning. He insists that environments shape behavior, but cautions that the findings are illustrative and not definitive. He calls for ongoing research with ethical rigor to better understand human vulnerability. The Stanford Prison Experiment isn't just a study, it's a cautionary tale. A chilling reminder of how morality can fracture under authority. Whether you see it as revealing or rigged, its echo persists. And it asks us to confront a haunting question. When systems bend, how far can good people fall? File 2. Charles Cullen. A nurse, a healer, a killer. A trusted nurse, a killer hiding in plain sight. For 16 years, Charles Cullen injected death into hospital wards unseen, unchecked, until one compassionate colleague dared to expose him. This is the chilling true story of a mercy killer and the nurse whose courage finally ended his spree. Born in New Jersey in 1960, the youngest of 8, Charles Cullen lost his father before age 1 and his mother in a car accident during his teens. After a stint in the Navy and nursing school completion in 1987, Cullen married and had 2 daughters. Divorced in 1993, it's during this turbulent period that he began killing, his first victims largely unknown. Over the next 16 years, Cullen moved among hospitals in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. His behavior raised suspicions. Elderly patients complained. He was fired for misplacing heart meds. But hospitals silently let him go, offering neutral references. This allowed him to kill again and again. Cullen used medical tools to kill. Digoxin used for heart failure and insulin were his main weapons. He manipulated digital drug systems to avoid detection and often targeted patients with promising recovery, not just the terminally ill. He called them mercy killings, but investigators warned impulsiveness and self-delusion may have driven many. In 2003, at Somerset Medical Center in Somerville, New Jersey, patient Reverend Florian Gall unexpectedly died. Lab results revealed lethal levels of digoxin in his system. A classic Cullen signature. That death triggered a criminal investigation. Amy Lauren and Cullen were friends who both worked the night shift in the intensive care unit at Somerset Medical Center in Somerville, New Jersey. Lauren was approached by detectives who suspected Cullen of poisoning hospital patients. The patient who triggered law enforcement interest was Florian Gall. As a patient at Somerset Medical, Gall had been improving, then he suddenly died of a massive heart attack. An autopsy showed that he had been administered digoxin. It was not on his prescription list. In small doses, digoxin can improve heart function, but the amount Gall had received was lethal. Independent of the police investigation, Lauren noticed that Cullen's medical charting was irregular. It was at points muddled and hasty, and there were frequent misspellings. The hospital's tracking system also showed Loren that Cullen spent unusual amounts of time on the files of other nurses' patients. As part of the investigation into Cullen, Loren met with him at a diner, wearing a wire. During Loren's meeting with Cullen in the diner, he did not overtly admit to the murders, but he said that he would go down fighting. The evidence from the meeting allowed police to then arrest Cullen. Cullen was arrested in December 2003. In custody, Cullen confessed to 30 to 40 killings, but investigators believe his victims may total up to 400. Medical records substantiated 29 confirmed murders, 6 more attempted murders. Cullen pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He faced 11 consecutive life sentences. Despite warning signs, hospitals overlooked Cullen's behavior. Fear of lawsuits and preserving reputation allowed him to move facilities unreported. Only after his arrest did states like New Jersey implement the Cullen Law, mandating better reporting and a 7-year record retention for disciplinary actions. Charles Greber's 2013 book, The Good Nurse, exposed the system's failure, while Netflix's film adaptation dramatized Loren's bravery and Cullen's horror. The documentary Capturing the Killer Nurse expanded the story, featuring first-hand accounts from Loren, detectives, and Cullen himself. Cullen remains incarcerated with possible parole not until 2388. His story stands as both a horror and a warning. It reminds us that trust in healthcare must be matched by vigilant oversight, and that one courageous caregiver can save many lives. Charles Cullen, once a nurse, became death's silent hand. Millions were at risk, and only one nurse's conscience stopped him. We must ask ourselves, how many might still be slipping through the cracks of systems built to heal? The real tragedy is not just his crimes, it's how close he came to lasting until today. File 3. Anthony Godby Johnson, The Fabricated Survivor. A best-selling memoir by a dying abused boy who may have never lived. For years, Anthony Godby Johnson inspired and moved many, but under it all, shadows and lies. This is the chilling true story behind the boy who never existed. In 1993, Anthony Godby Johnson published A Rock in a Hard Place, the heartbreaking autobiography of a child who survived horrific abuse, contracted HIV/AIDS, lost a leg, and stayed alive with indomitable spirit. The book, carried forwards by celebrated authors and quickly became a bestseller, hailed as a beacon of survival and courage. Anthony built friendships over the phone with author Armistead Maupin, Paul Monette, and even TV host Keith Olbermann. And Anthony's voice became known through phone calls. Anthony's intimate voice soon aroused suspicion. Voice analysts concluded that Anthony's and his adoptive mother, Vicki Johnson's voices came from the same person. No one, not publishers, agents, or even close friends, ever met Anthony in person. Investigators uncovered no birth certificate, adoption papers, hospital files, or legal documents to prove he existed. Even the claims about his abusive parents, an NYPD father supposedly tried and killed in prison, left no trace in court, corrections, or public archives. Vicki Johnson, whose real name was reportedly Joanne Vicky Fraginals, styled herself as Anthony's adoptive mother and a social worker, but no one confirmed her credentials. A 2001 New Yorker investigation by Tad Friend suggested she was likely a single woman from Union City, New Jersey, with no real family or adoption history. In 2006, ABC's 2020ths uncovered damning evidence. The photo of Anthony was not Anthony at all, but Steve Tarabokagia, a man who had grown up healthy in New Jersey. The link? Steve's former teacher was none other than Vicki Johnson, proving she had stolen a student's image to build the persona. It was also discovered that by the late 90s, Vicki had married child psychologist Mark Zackheim, who later faced charges of healthcare fraud and abuse, though he was acquitted on most counts. After Vicki's reported death around 2010, both she and Anthony vanished, never to be heard from again. Anthony's story remains a textbook case of a literary hoax. Part of the company of fabricated memoirs like J.T. Leroy or James Frey, investigations suggest it was entirely fictional, yet no definitive legal closure occurred. When Vicki Fraginals passed, the possibility of verification died with her. Armistead Maupin transformed the haunting experience into fiction with The Night Listener, a novel later adapted into a major film starring Robin Williams. The story mirrored his 6-year correspondence with an unseen boy, questioning whether fiction sometimes reveals deeper truths than fact. But the fact that many still believe Anthony existed speaks to the power of narrative and grief. Anthony's tale was emotionally powerful, a symbol of resilience and survival. It offered hope, empathy, and inspiration. Oprah Winfrey, Keith Olbermann, and others were moved. But without proof, and with only one voice, the story veered into the realm of emotional manipulation. The Anthony Godby Johnson story still lingers. His books remain in print, not because it's real, but because it felt true. It reminds us how powerful compassion can blind us to fact. And now, Anthony remains a ghost in literature and memory. With Vicky gone and no tangible evidence, we're left with a paradox. Did the boy never exist? Or have his supporters protected him by keeping the story alive? This is a reminder that not all inspiring stories are faithful to reality. Anthony Godby Johnson may not have been real, but his story still has power. It stands as a cautionary tale about empathy, trust, and the seductive lure of a moving narrative. In the end, the most haunting mystery isn't whether he existed, but who we become when we choose belief over proof. File 4. Shannan Gilbert. The Long Island Mystery. It began with a scream. A woman running through the night barefoot, terrified. Her voice crackled through a 911 call. "They're trying to kill me." But when police arrived, she was gone. What they found instead was a graveyard. May 1st, 2010. Shannan Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort from Jersey City, was on her way to a job. Driving past the place where the bones of the Long Island serial killer's victims lay hidden. She didn't know it, but the mysterious events of the next few hours would change the course of her life and forever link her to the hidden bodies in the brush. Shannan Gilbert was last seen running along the quiet roads of Oak Beach, barefoot and terrified. Her frantic 911 call lasted 23 minutes. She begged for help before disappearing into the marsh. 2 days later, Shannan's boyfriend called her family. She hadn't come home. Her sisters, Cher and Sarah, panicked. They knew the risks. Shannan had bipolar disorder, and she'd turned to escort work online. They feared the worst. Police initially dismissed her disappearance as accidental. But December 11th, 2010, 7 months later, while searching for Shannan, they found something else, something far worse. A K-9 unit stumbled upon human remains wrapped in burlap along Ocean Parkway. Within days, 3 more bodies were found, each within 500 feet of the others. They became known as the Gilgo Four: Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. All were young women. All were escorts. All had vanished between 2007 and 2010. Melissa Barthelemy, 24, was last seen in the Bronx in July 2009. After her disappearance, her teenage sister received disturbing phone calls from Melissa's number. A man whispered vulgarities. Police believe it was the killer. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25, vanished in July 2007. A mother of 2 from Connecticut. She had traveled to Manhattan for work. Her remains were found bound with a belt. Megan Waterman, 22, disappeared from a hotel in Hopage in June 2010. She had called her family hours before. Her body was found wrapped in burlap. Amber Costello, 27, vanished in September 2010. She was last seen leaving her West Babylon home without her phone or purse to meet a client who offered $1,500. Her roommate described the man who picked her up: tall, bushy-haired, driving a dark Chevy Avalanche. With no news, the Gilberts drove 140 miles to Oak Beach. They knocked on doors, handed out flyers, and pieced together a timeline. Despite the gruesome discoveries, the case stalled. On December 6, 2011, police found Shannan's jeans, shoes, purse, and ID in a marsh. A week later, they found her skeletal remains. The discovery of the Gilgo Four triggered one of the largest criminal investigations in Long Island history. Soon more bodies followed, bringing the total up to 11 victims. But still no arrests, no answers. Police claim Shannan drowned. but an independent autopsy suggested strangulation. Her family never stopped fighting for the truth. For years, the case languished. Families demanded justice. The stigma surrounding sex work slowed progress. But in 2022, a new task force took over and digitized years of evidence. They revisited witness accounts, phone records, and DNA. A discarded pizza crust provided the final clue. In July 2023, police arrested Rex Heuermann, 59-year-old architect from Massapequa Park. He lived just miles from Gilgo Beach. DNA from a discarded pizza crust linked him to hairs found on Melissa, Megan, and Amber. He was later charged with Maureen's murder, too. Inside his home, hundreds of weapons, 350 electronic devices, and a disturbing collection of violent pornography dating back to 1994, and maps. A killer hiding in plain sight. He used burner phones, fake emails, and searched for sadistic content online. His wife and children were out of town during each murder. He was charged with the murders of Melissa, Megan, Amber, and Maureen. In December 2024, he was charged with another murder, Valerie Mack. Her torso was found in Manorville, New York in 2000. In 2011, her head, hands, and right foot were found near Gilgo Beach. Heuermann has pleaded not guilty. He doesn't congregate with the rest of the population. He reads, watches TV, and prepares for his trial, which is pending. But the families of the victims and of Shannon Gilbert continue to seek justice. They were daughters, sisters, and mothers. Their lives mattered. And their voices once lost in the marsh are finally being heard.